Hey everyone, thank you so much for choosing this clip where I spoke to transfer journalist Ben Jacobs about the current goings on with Liverpool's pursuit of RB Leipzig winger Yan Diomande. Make sure you head to Redmen Plus for the rest of the conversation. We spoke about loads of different things and you can get it for just £1 for your first month. I'll see you there.
So with Yan Diomande, he's Liverpool's priority, but it's not a hill they're going to die on in the sense that with Alexander Isak, it was a transfer that dragged on all summer. Whereas with this, Liverpool want a little bit more clarity earlier. That's not to say that there aren't parallels. And I think the biggest one is if Liverpool get encouragement, they'll bid again and quickly. And if they don't, they're prepared to move on to other targets. So the pursuit is ongoing. But my anticipation is this is not going to run into August, for example. And I think another aspect to this story is that Leipzig are holding out for this high number of somewhere close to 130 million euros because they're still waiting for the player to communicate whether he's prepared to sign a new deal and if that means he leaves in 2027 and it shuts the door. So you have a slightly different component to all of this because with Isak, he was driving a move from day one of the summer and it was about Newcastle also finding a replacement. With Diamande, it's about Leipzig trying to stick to a high asking price. First of all, because they feel PSG could also enter the race and they could get a bidding war. And second of all, because they need that communication from the player as to whether he's going to stay or go. And Liverpool don't usually like to get sucked into these sagas where there are variables out of their control. So they've made one offer, which was rejected, which was 80 million euros and 20 million in add-ons. And then reports in the last 48 hours had suggested falsely, I'm not even sure they were reports, by the way, I think it was just one of those things that snowballed on social media, that this second bid had gone in. It hasn't at the time I'm recording this. And Liverpool are prepared to close this deal, but not unless they get that little bit of encouragement from Leipzig to engage, because my information is the first bid was rejected relatively swiftly. And therefore, Liverpool are now exploring other targets while still working on Diamande. So it's not like they've moved on, but there are contingencies in case Leipzig's not for sale stance changes. And I think we will get a shift because, as I say, PSG could enter the race, player could communicate that he doesn't want to sign a new deal, and the former equals the possibility that Leipzig get a bidding war. And then potentially if PSG win that race, Bradley Barcola becomes one of the names available. The latter might enable Liverpool to shave something off the price. Diamande is open to Liverpool, so they're quite confident on the player side. And that's where we're at the moment. And my expectation is that during the World Cup, we're going to get more clarity on this deal. And if Liverpool get that encouragement that the player definitively is not going to sign that new deal and wants Liverpool, then they will likely move ahead with the second bid and try and get that one done sooner rather than later, so they don't get into a situation where this drags on all summer, like the Alexander Isak situation. If they genuinely assess either PSG are going to enter this race and maybe the player's perspective has changed, or Leipzig are just going to be really hard on that price or not for sale stance, then there are other targets. Bradley Barcola is obviously one of them that I mentioned before. PSG have a not for sale stance at the moment. That could change if they themselves add a player that is a wide attacker, even if it's on the other side to Bradley Barcola. And along with Diamande, you've got Magnus Akliush that we should keep an eye on. And then, as I revealed, 3 other targets too. Matías Fernandes Pardo, who's also at the World Cup. Syed Al-Mala, who has had other Premier League interest this window, and Brighton's Yakuba Minter. So come what may, Liverpool are going to add another attacker, and Yan Diomande remains their leading target.
Just in terms of some of the alternatives you just outlined there, are they sort of, if the Leipzig stance doesn't soften, and of course if the Diamande deal becomes an impossibility, are they just things they'll start working on then, or are they quietly sort of doing a little bit of like work on the others? What's the current situation around that? Are they already starting to maybe have conversations to the extent of putting some feelers out there on those 3 other alternatives?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say they're actively working on those alternatives simply because it gives you leverage in the market as well. Liverpool are not the kind of club to put all their eggs in one basket. And if they go all in on Diamande and don't look at these other names, then they have less leverage. So they'll want, no doubt, as part of their conversations with Leipzig, for it to be clear that they can move on and there are other viable targets, and they'll want to be informed by the valuation of those targets too. So it can be helpful, as Andrea Berta's doing at Arsenal as well, to kind of concurrently line up multiple deals. And then when you're negotiating with Leipzig, you can point to other availability, other fees, and you can be informed by market movement. And that might mean that you get a better deal, because if Leipzig realise that Liverpool are only looking at Diamande and Liverpool desperately want Diamande, and that there's competition from PSG for Diamande, and there's no other options, there's no other contingencies, there's no under like-for-like profiles, then naturally that price is just going to stay really, really high. So it's smart by all well-run clubs to start that extra sort of contingency planning around some of these other targets. But if they can get Diamande, he's obviously the one that they want.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way, doesn't it? But you're right, Liverpool will do their due diligence on footballers, full stop. But in this circumstance, it would be wise to start thinking about the possibility of having to move on, as you kind of outlined there. That was a clip from Expert Insight. To check out the whole show, simply download the Redmen Plus app or click the link in the description.